My sister Emma announced her engagement at our family Thanksgiving dinner, right after I had just closed the biggest deal of my career. But nobody heard about my achievement because Emma's news came with a 2-carat diamond ring and tears of joy that commanded the entire room's attention. What they didn't know was that I had been secretly funding her lifestyle for the past 3 years, and her fiancé was about to discover some very uncomfortable truths. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this situation. I'm Sarah, the middle child in a family where birth order apparently determined your worth. Emma, my younger sister, had always been the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect boyfriend, perfect everything. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, the one who quietly handled problems while Emma basked in the spotlight. 3 years ago, when Emma graduated from college with an art degree and zero job prospects, she moved back home with grand plans of becoming a freelance graphic designer. The reality was less glamorous. She spent most days in her pajamas, occasionally taking on small projects that barely covered her coffee budget. But somehow, she maintained an Instagram-worthy lifestyle, complete with designer clothes, fancy brunches, and weekend trips to Napa Valley. The family assumed she was doing well with her creative career. Emma certainly encouraged this assumption, posting pictures of her home office and talking about her clients in vague terms. What they didn't realize was that I had been quietly transferring money into her account every month. 500 here, 1,000 there, sometimes more when she had what she called emergencies. It started innocently enough. Emma called me in tears one night because she couldn't make her car payment. As her older sister, I felt protective. I sent her the money and told her not to worry about paying it back. Then it was rent assistance, then credit card payments, then money for business expenses that looked suspiciously like shopping sprees. But Emma had a gift for making her problems sound temporary and her gratitude sound genuine. She would send me long texts about how she was so close to landing a big client and how my help was just until she got on her feet. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to be the supportive sister who helped her dreams come true. Meanwhile, I was building a career in commercial real estate. Not glamorous, but lucrative. While Emma was curating her social media presence, I was working 60-hour weeks, closing deals, and building relationships with clients. I lived in a modest apartment, drove a reliable but unremarkable car, and saved most of my income. In family conversations, my job was always described as doing well in real estate, while Emma's artistic pursuits were discussed with the reverence reserved for a Renaissance master. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was funding the lifestyle that made Emma look successful while my actual success was treated as mundane. But I told myself it was temporary. Emma would eventually stand on her own, and I would stop being her silent benefactor. Then came the engagement announcement. Emma had been dating Bradley for 8 months, and according to her, he was everything she had ever wanted. Investment banker, graduate degree from Wharton, family money dating back to the Mayflower. The kind of man who belonged in the lifestyle Emma had been faking. Thanksgiving dinner was at our parents' house in suburban Connecticut. The usual cast of characters was assembled around the dining room table that had hosted decades of family gatherings. My parents, my older brother Marcus with his wife and kids, Emma, Bradley, and me. The table was set with our grandmother's china, candles flickered in crystal holders, and the smell of turkey filled the air with the promise of tradition and warmth. I had been looking forward to this dinner for weeks, not because of the turkey, but because I had finally closed the Morrison account. 6 months of negotiations, site visits, and relationship building had culminated in a $20 million commercial development deal. My commission alone would be more than most people make in 5 years. I had worked harder for this deal than anything in my career, and I was finally ready to share my success with my family. But before I could say anything about the Morrison deal, Emma stood up, her cheeks flushed with excitement and maybe a little wine. "Bradley and I have an announcement," she said, her voice carrying the theatrical quality she had perfected in high school drama club. Bradley, looking appropriately nervous and happy, reached for her hand. "Emma has made me the happiest man alive," he said, his voice carrying the practiced sincerity of someone who had spent years in client presentations. She said yes. The room exploded in congratulations. My mother started crying, my father got up to shake Bradley's hand, and Marcus began talking about planning a bachelor party. Emma displayed her ring, which caught the candlelight and threw tiny rainbows across the ceiling. It was beautiful, probably cost more than my car, and represented everything Emma had always wanted. I sat there, my news about the Morrison deal suddenly feeling insignificant. This was Emma's moment, and I knew better than to compete for attention. I had learned that lesson long ago. Emma's moments were sacred in our family, and everyone else's achievements were supporting players in her ongoing performance. But as I watched Bradley beam with pride and listened to Emma talk about wedding plans, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the exhaustion of carrying Emma's financial burden for so long, or maybe it was just the accumulated weight of years of being the responsible one in the shadows. Whatever it was, I found myself studying Bradley's face and wondering what he really knew about his fiancée. Emma was talking about planning a destination wedding in Tuscany, complete with a 3-day celebration and accommodations for 50 guests. She described the venue she had already researched, the designer she wanted to hire, and the photographer whose work she had been following on Instagram. The estimated cost, even by her conservative calculations, was approaching 6 figures. Of course, we'll need to start saving immediately, Emma said, glancing at Bradley with a kind of smile that suggested saving was more of a romantic concept than a practical plan. But we have time to make it perfect. Bradley nodded, but I caught something in his expression. A flicker of concern, maybe, or calculation. He was an investment banker, which meant he understood numbers and risk better than most people. He had to be wondering how a freelance graphic designer planned to contribute to a Tuscan wedding fund. Emma's business has been growing so much lately, my mother said, passing the cranberry sauce. She's been so busy with clients. I nearly choked on my wine. Emma's business existed primarily in her social media posts and family dinner conversations. Her actual income for the past 3 years had been approximately zero, unless you counted the money I had been sending her. Actually, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice, I have some news too. Emma's smile tightened slightly. She had always been possessive of spotlight moments, and engagement announcements were particularly sacred territory. But I had spent 3 years funding her performance, and I was tired of being the supporting cast in her show. I closed the Morrison account this week, I continued, aware that the entire table was looking at me with polite interest. It's a $20 million commercial development deal. The commission will be, well, let's just say it's been a very good year. The reaction was everything I had hoped for. My father's eyebrows shot up, Marcus whistled appreciatively, and my mother looked genuinely impressed. Even Bradley seemed interested, leaning forward with the kind of attention he probably gave to promising investment opportunities. 20 million, my father repeated. Sarah, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I wanted to be sure it was final, I said, which was partly true. The other part was that I had learned to downplay my achievements in a family where Emma's artistic struggles were treated with more reverence than my financial success. Emma's smile had frozen in place. She looked like someone trying to maintain composure during a surprise party thrown for someone else. That's wonderful, Sarah, she said, her voice carrying the kind of brightness that suggested she was working very hard to sound enthusiastic. What kind of development? Bradley asked, and I realized he was asking the kind of detailed questions that Emma's family never asked about her work. I found myself explaining the project in detail. Mixed-use development, residential and commercial space, sustainable building practices, long-term investment potential. Bradley asked smart questions, and I realized I was enjoying the conversation more than I had enjoyed talking about work with my family in years. So, you're handling the entire transaction? Bradley asked. I'm the lead agent, I said. It's been my project from the beginning. Emma cleared her throat, a sound that usually signaled her need to redirect attention back to herself. Bradley, tell them about the promotion you're getting, she said, her hand resting on his arm in a gesture that looked casual but felt territorial. Bradley looked slightly uncomfortable. It's not official yet, he said. Just something we're discussing. He's being modest, Emma said, her voice carrying the kind of confidence that suggested she knew more about Bradley's career than he did. He's going to be managing director next year. I watched Bradley's face carefully. He looked like someone who had been volunteered for something without his consent. The expression was familiar to me. I had seen it on my own face in countless family photos where Emma had announced my achievements before I was ready to share them. Emma, Bradley said gently, nothing's been decided yet. But Emma was already moving on, describing the kind of life they would have once Bradley's promotion came through. The bigger apartment, the country club membership, the charitable foundation they would start together. She painted a picture of their future with the same confident strokes she used to describe her current lifestyle. I found myself watching Bradley's face more carefully. He was nodding and smiling, but there was something in his expression that reminded me of myself during Emma's more elaborate storytelling sessions. The look of someone who loved her but was beginning to question the gap between her narrative and reality. Emma's been telling me about her design work, Bradley said, and I realized he was trying to change the subject. She showed me some of her recent projects. Oh yes, my mother said. Emma's been so busy. She's been working on some really big accounts. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the feeling I got whenever Emma's fictional career was discussed as if it were real. I had been enabling this fiction for 3 years, and I was suddenly exhausted by the performance. What kind of projects? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Emma's smile flickered for just a moment before returning to full brightness. Oh, branding packages, website design, marketing materials. The usual stuff. For what companies? I pressed, and I saw Emma's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Several different ones, she said. You wouldn't know them. They're mostly startups. I nodded, but I was thinking about the bank statements I had been reviewing all year. Emma's account showed regular deposits from me and almost no income from anywhere else. If she had clients, they were paying her in exposure and good wishes. Bradley was looking between us with the kind of interest that suggested he was picking up on an undercurrent he didn't fully understand. Emma mentioned she might need to scale back her work once we're married, he said. Focus more on family life. Emma's laugh sounded a little too bright. Well, we'll see. I love what I do, but I also want to be present for our future. I felt something snap inside me. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was the exhaustion of 3 years of financial support, or maybe it was just the accumulated weight of watching Emma perform her fictional life while I worked 60-hour weeks to make it possible. Whatever it was, I found myself speaking before I could stop myself. Emma, I said, my voice carrying an edge that made everyone at the table look up. How exactly are you planning to pay for a wedding in Tuscany? The question hung in the air like smoke from a blown-out candle. Emma's smile faltered completely, and I saw something flicker across her face that looked almost like panic. We'll figure it out, she said, her voice defensive. We have time to save. Save from what income? I asked, and I realized I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Because according to my records, you haven't had a paying client in 2 years. The silence that followed was the kind that makes you aware of the sound of your own heartbeat. My parents looked confused, Marcus looked uncomfortable, and Bradley looked like someone who had just realized he was in the middle of a conversation he didn't understand. Emma's face had gone pale, except for 2 bright spots of color on her cheeks. Sarah, she said, her voice carrying a warning that I had heard many times over the years, this isn't the time or place. Actually, I said, surprised by the calmness in my own voice, I think it is. I reached for my purse and pulled out my phone. I had been dreading this conversation for months, but now that it was happening, I felt a strange sense of relief. I opened my banking app and scrolled through 3 years of transactions. Emma, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, I've been sending you money every month for 3 years. $37,000, to be exact. Bradley's fork clattered against his plate. My parents looked like they had been slapped. Marcus was staring at me with his mouth slightly open. Sarah, Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. Please don't do this. But I was already committed to the conversation. 3 years of carrying Emma's financial burden, 3 years of watching her perform a lifestyle I was secretly funding, 3 years of being the responsible one in the shadows while she basked in praise for achievements that didn't exist. I've been covering your rent, your car payments, your credit cards, your shopping trips, your weekend getaways. I continued, scrolling through the transactions. Every month, like clockwork. And the whole time, You've been telling everyone about your successful design business. Bradley was looking between Emma and me with a kind of expression that suggested he was rapidly recalculating everything he thought he knew about his fiancée. Emma, he said slowly, is this true? Emma's composure was cracking in real time. The confident, successful woman who had announced her engagement 20 minutes earlier was disappearing, replaced by someone who looked cornered and desperate. Sarah helped me out sometimes, she said, her voice defensive. That's what sisters do. Helped you out, I repeated, and I could hear the years of frustration in my own voice. Emma, I've been supporting you completely. You don't have a business. You don't have clients. You don't have income. You have me. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Emma's face had gone from pale to red, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. But for the first time in our relationship, I didn't feel the familiar urge to come for her and make everything better. Why are you doing this? Emma asked, her voice breaking. Why are you trying to ruin my engagement? I'm not trying to ruin anything, I said. I'm trying to understand how you're planning to pay for a wedding that costs more than most people make in a year when you don't have a job. Bradley set down his wine glass with the kind of precision that suggested he was working very hard to maintain control. Emma, he said, his voice carefully neutral. We need to talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, Emma said, her voice rising. Sarah is being dramatic. Yes, she's helped me out financially, but that doesn't mean I don't have a business. I scrolled through my phone again and found what I was looking for. Emma, I said, your bank account shows zero income from clients in the past 2 years. The only deposits are from me and occasionally from Mom and Dad. My parents exchanged a look that suggested they were having their own moment of realization. My father cleared his throat. Emma, he said slowly, we thought the money we sent you is just to help with startup costs. Emma's entire fictional edifice was collapsing in real time. The successful graphic designer, the thriving business, the independent lifestyle, all of it was built on a foundation of family support that everyone had assumed was temporary. This is humiliating, Emma said, tears now flowing freely. Sarah, how could you do this to me? I didn't do anything to you, I said, and I realized I was no longer angry, just tired. I've been supporting you for 3 years. I've been your silent partner in a business that doesn't exist. I've been funding a lifestyle that you've been taking credit for. Bradley was looking at Emma with the kind of expression that suggested he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Emma, he said, his voice gentle but firm, we need to have an honest conversation about our finances. Our finances are fine, Emma said, her voice defensive. I have a business. No, I said, my voice cutting through her protests. You don't. You have me. And I'm done. The words surprised me as much as they surprised everyone else. I hadn't planned to end my financial support of Emma, but sitting there at the Thanksgiving table, watching her announce plans for a wedding she couldn't afford with money she didn't have, I realized I was finished being her silent benefactor. Sarah, my mother said, her voice carrying the kind of diplomatic tone she used when trying to prevent family conflicts, maybe we should discuss this privately. No, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. We've been discussing this privately for 3 years. Emma has been pretending to have a career, while I've been funding her lifestyle. Bradley deserves to know what he's getting into. Emma stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I can't believe you're doing this to me, she said, her voice breaking. On my engagement day. Emma, Bradley said, reaching for her hand, please sit down. We need to talk about this. But Emma was already moving toward the door, her engagement ring catching the light as she gestured dramatically. I need some air, she said, and she disappeared into the kitchen. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents looked stunned, Marcus looked uncomfortable, and Bradley looked like someone who had just realized he was in the middle of a much more complicated situation than he had bargained for. I should go talk to her, Bradley said, starting to rise. Wait, I said, and something in my voice made him pause. There's more. Bradley sat back down, and I saw him brace himself for whatever was coming next. I scrolled through my phone again, looking for the screenshots I had been saving for months. Emma's been showing people an Instagram account for her design business, I said. Professional photos, client testimonials, portfolio pieces. It looks very impressive. I've seen it, Bradley said cautiously. The client testimonials are fake, I said. Written by Emma using fake accounts. The portfolio pieces are stock images and templates she downloaded from design websites. The whole thing is fictional. Bradley's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, realization, and finally something that looked like betrayal. How do you know this? Because I've been helping her maintain the fiction, I said. Not intentionally, but by funding her lifestyle, I've been enabling her to create an elaborate performance about success that doesn't exist. I showed him the screenshots on my phone. Fake client reviews written in Emma's distinctive style, portfolio pieces that I had traced back to their original sources, testimonials from businesses that didn't exist. She's been building this fictional career for 3 years, I said. Complete with fake clients, fake income, and fake success. And I've been the one paying for it. Bradley stared at the phone screen for a long moment. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. Why are you telling me this? Because you're about to marry her, I said. And you deserve to know who you're marrying. The kitchen door swung open, and Emma returned, her face red from crying but her composure mostly restored. She had the look of someone who had given herself a pep talk and was ready to fight. Sarah, she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority she used when she was trying to take control of a situation, I think you've said enough. Actually, I said, I don't think I have. Emma's eyes flashed with something between anger and fear. Bradley, can we go home? I don't want to be here anymore. But Bradley was looking at her with the kind of expression that suggested he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Emma, he said, his voice careful, we need to talk about what Sarah just told me. Sarah is being vindictive, Emma said, her voice rising. She's jealous of my success, and she's trying to sabotage my relationship. What success? I asked, and I heard the years of frustration in my own voice. Emma, you don't have a business. You don't have clients. You don't have income. You have an Instagram account full of lies and a bank account that I've been filling for 3 years. Emma's face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the scared, lost woman behind the confident performance. Sarah, please, she said, her voice breaking. Don't take this away from me. I'm not taking anything away from you, I said. I'm just not going to keep paying for your fictional life anymore. Bradley was looking between us with the kind of expression that suggested he was rapidly processing a lot of new information. Emma, he said slowly, is what Sarah is saying true? Emma looked around the room desperately, as if searching for an escape route. It's complicated, she said finally. It's not complicated, I said. It's simple. You've been lying to everyone, including yourself, about who you are and what you do. And I've been enabling it. The truth hung in the air like a sword. Emma's entire carefully constructed reality was crumbling in real time, and everyone at the table was watching it happen. Emma, Bradley said, his voice gentle but firm, I need you to be honest with me. Do you have a business? Emma's silence was answer enough. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, looking like someone who had just been stripped of everything she thought she was. I was trying to build something, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I was trying to become someone worth loving. The words hit me like a physical blow. For the first time in 3 years, I saw Emma not as the manipulative sister who had been taking advantage of my generosity, but as the scared, insecure woman who had been so desperate for approval that she had built an entire fictional life to get it. Emma, Bradley said, his voice soft, you don't need to pretend to be someone else for me to love you. But Emma was shaking her head. Yes, I do, she said. Because who I really am isn't enough. I'm not successful like Sarah. I'm not accomplished like Marcus. I'm just nothing. The room fell silent again. My parents looked stricken, Marcus looked uncomfortable, and I felt a familiar stab of guilt. Had I contributed to Emma's insecurity by being the successful, responsible one? Had my achievements made her feel like she needed to invent her own? Emma, I said, surprised by the gentleness in my own voice. "You're not nothing. But you can't build a life on lies." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "I know," she said. I didn't know how to stop." Bradley reached for her hand, and I saw him make a decision in real time. "Emma," he said, "we can figure this out. But we need to be honest with each other." Emma looked at him with a kind of expression that suggested she was seeing him clearly for the first time too. "Even knowing all this, you still want to marry me?" "I want to marry the real you," Bradley said. "Not the version you think I need to see." It was a beautiful moment, and I felt genuinely happy for them. But I also knew that my role in their story was ending. I had been Emma's silent partner for 3 years, and it was time for her to stand on her own. "Emma," I said, drawing her attention back to me. "I meant what I said. I'm not going to keep sending you money." Emma nodded, tears still flowing. "I know," she said. "I need to figure out how to take care of myself." "You do," I said. "And you can. But you need to start with the truth." Bradley was looking at both of us with a kind of expression that suggested he was trying to process everything that had just happened. "So," he said slowly, "what happens now?" Emma looked around the room at all of us, her family and her fiancé, and I saw her make her own decision. "Now I figure out who I really am," she said. "And I stop pretending to be someone I'm not." It wasn't the ending I had expected when I woke up that morning. I had planned to share my success with my family and enjoy a traditional Thanksgiving dinner. Instead, I had dismantled my sister's entire fictional life and forced her to confront the truth about herself. But as I looked around the table at my family, I realized that truth, even painful truth, was better than the elaborate fiction we had all been maintaining. Emma's fake business, my silent financial support, our parents' willful ignorance, all of it had been built on a foundation of lies that was always going to collapse eventually. "Emma," my father said, speaking for the first time since the revelation, "we love you no matter what you do for a living." Emma looked at him with surprise, as if the possibility of unconditional love had never occurred to her. "Even if I'm not successful?" "Success isn't just about money or career," my mother said. "It's about being honest and kind and trying to do the right thing." It was a simple sentiment, but I saw Emma absorb it like someone hearing good news for the first time. She had been so focused on performing success that she had forgotten what it actually meant. The rest of the evening passed in a kind of subdued peace. Emma and Bradley talked quietly in the corner, working through the implications of everything that had been revealed. My parents processed the reality of their daughter's situation with the kind of grace that comes from years of navigating family crises. Marcus made jokes to lighten the mood, and gradually, the tension began to ease. As we were cleaning up after dinner, Emma approached me while I was washing dishes. "Sarah," she said, her voice tentative, "I owe you an apology." I looked at her, this woman who had been my responsibility for 3 years, and realized I was seeing her clearly for the first time. Not as the golden child who could do no wrong, not as the burden I had been carrying, but as my sister who had been struggling with her own demons. "You don't need to apologize," I said. "You need to figure out what you want to do with your life." Emma nodded, and I saw something in her expression that I hadn't seen in years. Determination. "I think I want to go back to school," she said. "Maybe get a teaching credential. I've always been good with kids." It was the first time I had heard Emma talk about her future in terms of what she actually wanted to do rather than what would look impressive on Instagram. "That sounds like a good plan," I said. "I'll need to get a job while I'm in school," Emma continued. "A real job. I can't keep depending on you." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. "You can do it," I said. "You're stronger than you think." Emma smiled, and for the first time in years, it looked completely genuine. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. I know I took advantage of your generosity, and I'm sorry. Just don't do it again," I said, and we both laughed. As I drove home that night, I thought about the day's events and realized that everything had changed. Emma would have to rebuild her life from the ground up, but this time it would be based on truth rather than fiction. Bradley would have to decide whether he wanted to marry the real Emma rather than the version she had been performing. And I would have to figure out what to do with my life now that I was no longer responsible for supporting hers. The Morrison deal was still the biggest achievement of my career, but it no longer felt like the most important thing that had happened that day. Sometimes the most significant moments in our lives come not from our successes, but from our decisions to stop enabling other people's failures. 3 months later, Emma started working as a receptionist at a dental office while taking classes to become a teacher. She moved out of our parents' house and into a small apartment that she could actually afford. Her Instagram account now showed her real life, modest but honest, struggling but authentic. Bradley decided to marry her anyway. Their wedding was a small ceremony in our parents' backyard, paid for with money they had actually earned. It was beautiful in a way that the fictional Tuscan wedding never could have been. And me? I used my commission from the Morrison deal to start my own real estate firm. No silent partners, no fictional success, just me and the career I had built through years of hard work. For the first time in my adult life, I was living entirely for myself. The most important lesson I learned that Thanksgiving was that you can't build a real life on fictional foundations. Emma had been pretending to be successful, while I had been pretending that supporting her was temporary. Both of us had been lying to ourselves, and the truth had set us both free. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is to stop enabling their worst impulses. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. And sometimes the most important thing you can do for your family is to tell them the truth, even when it hurts. That Thanksgiving dinner changed everything for our family. It was messy and painful and embarrassing, but it was also necessary. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve to live in reality rather than in the elaborate fiction we had been maintaining. Emma is genuinely happy now in a way she never was when she was performing success. Bradley loves the real Emma more than he ever loved the fictional version. And I am finally free to live my own life without carrying the weight of someone else's dreams. The truth really will set you free, but first it will probably ruin Thanksgiving dinner. If you've ever found yourself in a similar situation, supporting someone who is taking advantage of your generosity, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. How did you handle it? What would you do differently? And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life drama and family revelations.